Well, we're in that quiet period between new release titles where I'd normally do a Road to Gotham Knights video on Arkham Origins, but I thought I'd do something different. That, and I'll finish the Arkham games well before Gotham Knights comes out. Now, so I thought about going back to No Man's Sky and seeing how it is in 2020, but to be honest, I could barely get through a couple of hours. It was a bit painful if I'm honest. Again, I'm saying if I'm honest a lot, but it was painful to go back, and I even tried playing it with a friend to a point where we quit after a couple of hours and we played golf with your friends on Xbox Game Pass.
Are you fucking kidding me? Fuck off.
So, I thought I'd do another video on Star Wars Squadrons with some tips and tricks for multiplayer and a little bit of a comparison to Star Wars Battlefront 2's Starfighter Assault and how the game is a little different from that. Now, last week I briefly glossed over the dogfight and multiplayer modes and different ships and upgrades. These tips will generally transfer over to both game modes. Now, obviously I'm going to avoid basic tips like communicate, because that's just a given. Yes, it is helpful to tell your team what you're doing, where you're going, and calling out enemies, and talking isn't really a tip now, is it? In any dogfighting game, you'll be chasing or chased by an enemy at some point. Now in Battlefront 2, to quickly turn and move, you'd basically pull back all of your speed to its slowest possible speed and try sharp turning, or, lose them in tight areas around the map and hopefully they crash out. And while you can outrun and go through tight areas in Squadrons and hope to lose your tail, slowing your engines to its slowest speed isn't the quickest way to turn. On your speed meter in your cockpit, besides showing your speed, it'll also sort of show what gear you're in, if you will. By putting the throttle all the way up, you'll go fast, and by pulling it all the way down, you'll go slow. Duh, Dudi. But if you keep your ship in the middle field where the dials are white, this is the engine speed best for turning and banking. By having the speed too high or too low, you won't turn as fast. Also worth noting, you can lower your throttle to 0, so you'll simply just sit there and hover. And basically, you're a sitting target. Now if an enemy notices you're stationary and you need to speed up to get out of there, your engines will need to take some time to get up to speed and get away. Now you'll hear a little beep inside the cockpit when the engine hits that sweet spot and is in the middle of the gauge. So after a while you won't even need to look at your speed gauge, you'll just need to listen for the beep. I briefly touched on this in my video review, but I still think it's worth noting. When it's time to attack enemy capital ships, they'll have their deflector shields, which is obviously protecting themselves. Attack their ship from range, you'll obviously hit their shields, but you can fly in and under their shields and damage the ship and subsystems directly. Attacking subsystems will disable and open up weak points for the capital ship. Obviously getting close to capital ships is hard, and even harder if you're playing as the Empire in my opinion. But by flying under the enemy's shield and dropping bombs or blasting them anywhere on the hull, you deal damage to the ship's health pool rather than their shields. Now on the Imperial Star Destroyer, it's easy to remember and find certain subsystems. The shield generator are those two domes located on top of the bridge, but the shield generators on the New Republic's MC-75 is on the side, and they look a little bit like gills. Now destroying both the left and the right shield generator will then permanently remove the shields on the capital ship, as they do regenerate after a certain period of time. But if you can't find the subsystems, you can hit the next target button, which is the A button on Xbox for example, and by facing the enemy capital ship and hitting this button, it will cycle through the subsystems and show you where they're located on the ship in your cockpit on the viewfinder. Assaulting a capital ship is generally a one-way trip, as you'll either be taken out by defending starfighters or turrets located on the capital ship. It's even harder when you're taking on an MC-75 and TIEs, as they have no shields to absorb attacks. Now when playing capital ship assault against AI fighters are super fucking accurate, but when playing against other players they won't be as accurate. But either way, the turrets on the capital ships are AI and they're a pain in the ass. If you get past the defending fighters and make it to the capital ship, turrets will 99% of the time take you out. Now by targeting and taking out this capital ship's targeting system, the turrets will find it harder to find you and lock onto you, giving you more breathing room and a chance to get in a second bombing run or survive the initial assault. The single player campaign will teach you how to instruct your team to attack targets. Now, if you're playing multiplayer and you're not using a headset, or if your team just isn't communicating, tagging and calling out targets will help focus your team's fire. This will highlight to everyone on your team to target an enemy that you've called out, or to defend a target if it's your own capital ship. Now this one is sort of tied into callouts, but if you've got someone chasing you, double tapping A, again I'm using the Xbox as a reference, will highlight the enemy fighter chasing you. Now by hitting the call out button, this will highlight to everyone on the team that you've asked them to help eliminate an enemy. Now if you've got a headset, then asking for help and tagging the enemy too will help you and your team locate and stress that you're being chased and that you need help. Now I'm not just meaning play the game and practice some of these techniques, but there is a practice mode in the game. You'll arrive at a Star Destroyer graveyard and the setting is perfect. Get a feel for each ship and weapon upgrade and sacrifices too. For example, I was noticing I was getting better maneuverability and acceleration, but awful speed in an engine choice I'd picked for my TIE Interceptor. So after playing around and changing my engine to more speed but less maneuverability, I was getting used to moving at incredible speeds and performing boost drifts to a point where I could compensate for my lack of turning. But also, some ships are bigger and different than others. A-Wings and Interceptors are fast and small, so you can sweep through tight gaps where ships like the U-Wing and the TIE Reaper won't make that. You can even spawn in enemy capital ships and have a play around to get used to certain attack patterns and techniques. It's also just fun to fly alongside a Star Destroyer and through the grooves, if I'm honest. Well, that's all the tips and tricks I have so far for Star Wars Squadrons. If you've been playing Squadrons and you've got some tips for other viewers or me, hit us up in the comments below. Now, I've been loving every moment with Squadrons and I'm holding out for some DLC or even a potential sequel at some point because this cow has plenty of milk left. I'll be taking a look at Watch Dogs Legion, the Xbox Series X, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and yes, returning to my Road of Gotham Knights videos with Arkham Origins at some point. But if you enjoyed the video, a like, comment, share, subscribe would be a rad way of helping me out and showing your support for the channel. Now if you'll excuse me, I gotta get rid of those pesky rebel scum pilots from my sector of the galaxy.
Your republic is finished here.